Hi YouTube, Regina here from Simply Fundamental. A few years back, I helped a family member pay for a storage facility. Were locked out of their storage facility because they had defaulted or not paid in alignment with the contract. And so they promised to pay me back, and eventually they did. But it was $533. And I just looked at it to do this video on November 14th of 2017. And then a few days later, because they hadn't gone to the facility yet, they had to pay another $190. So we're talking back in 2017 having a $190 a month storage facility. And this family member was broke. Eventually, when they needed money again to pay for the storage facility, I didn't end up giving them the money. And they lost their items. So I want to go into it and talk about storage wars and the hidden cost related to it. A lot of people are paying money for storage facilities, and it ranges. So in Brooklyn, it's different pricing depending on the size of the space, and it's different pricing for Florida too, depending on whether or not are if you have access to the facility 24 hours, and if it's climate control for the conditions in the area that you're in. So there's that. But let's talk about it. So, why does anyone need a storage facility? Going back in the 1970s, storage facilities started to boom. And I think it was back then homes were much smaller. So back in the 1950s, home the average home size, I think, was 983 square feet. And the average, I think it was multi generational. So you had 3.8 people living in a home at that time. Fast forward to today, and the average home size has grown to 2,500 square feet. And you have 2.5 people living in a home. And so that changes because you have a lot. People are moving, getting married later, or people are having less kids. And then you have the number goes down too, is because you have a lot of single occupancy households. So that's why it's probably 2.5 versus the 8.3. And of course, we're not in the baby boomer generation anymore. So the numbers have gone down, the number of people living in the household. But the square footage has gone up. And so as the square footage has gone up, the storage industry has boomed to a $39 billion a year industry. And that's a lot. So they say there's an average that there is enough storage, I think if I read my notes, of 7 square feet for every American citizen, that there's enough storage space out there. And about roughly 1 in 11 households rents a storage facility. 1 in 11, despite the fact that the home size has grown dramatically. Now, why? Why are people renting a home? Considering that the size of the home has at least more than doubled than it did in the 1950s. Well, some of it has to do with, cultural and psychological factors. So let's talk about, if I'm looking at my notes, consumerism. So the rise of consumerism, there's some things that we purchase are cheaper, they're mass produced, you can get more items. So things have become more affordable, more accessible with e-commerce. And then there's emotional attachment. So people have sentimental value to things. Maybe they inherited things, they don't know what to do with it. And then there's fear of scarcity, that there's just in case, I want to hold on to this in case I need it in the future. And then there's transition changes. So if someone moves, they need to store their items. So there is that. So if you're downsizing, you're moving, and you didn't have time to declutter, you're going to put it in storage. So that's typically what happens. And then it ends up staying in storage because people have a difficult time making the decision to declutter. And let's just face it, people don't have a lot of time. So that's what happens. That's why storage facility has gone out of hand. Let me see if sentimental. And then of course, The homes have changed. So in some of the homes, they're saying that what in the past now they have the homes are like bigger bedrooms, bigger more closet space. People are storing seasonal items. The homes actually have misuse space, mixed use space. So in the past, you didn't have a room that was dedicated to an office or a gym or a media room. And in our homes today, those are like, so people move things out of their homes for that as well. And then things like seasonal or hobby items that if you're not using it, then that ends up going into storage. So more space means more stuff. And so there's 2.3 billion square feet of storage space. Again, enough for 7 square feet of storage for every American to have outside of their home. That's crazy. 2.3 billion. There are 50,000 storage facilities. That's more than, what do they say? McDonald's, Starbucks, and Dunkin' combined. So there's a lot of storage space out there. So what can you do? Declutter, simplify. A lot of people don't do this. Use smarter storage solutions in your home. Go up versus, like I've seen people put, storage above windowsills, like creating shelving units above windowsills. And then maybe you have another family member that can store something. In like certain states, they don't have basements, but in other states they do. And so I've never used a storage facility. I don't even think anyone in my family member has, but I come from a big family and people do have basements. But most people, I think like, I wouldn't say most, it's about 25% of homes today do not have cars in their garages because they're using it for storage. So people have too much stuff. Again, 30,000. No, it's 300,000 items. So, how much is this costing us in Brooklyn? For a 5x5, you can pay $87 a month, depending on if you want climate control spaces. There are smaller spaces for lockers. So lockers cost about $19 a month. And then 5x10 spaces average about $108. 10x10 go for 200 to 250, 215 on average. And then the largest spaces, 10x20, which fits the size of like a 2 to 3 size bedroom home, amount of stuff you could fit in the storage unit. Those go for roughly close to $500 a month, depending on where the location is and the facility. So a lot of people default. So we're going to get into that. But storage units in Florida, it's actually kind of similar in pricing. So again, lockers around $19 a month, but then the 5x5s, they're around, instead of like 108, it's 99. And then if you want some climate control options, if your locker is going to be climate control, you can go anywhere up from 40 to 82 a month. The mid-size units are 10x10s, and they range from 132 to 222. So that's kind of the same of 200 to 215. And then climate control options in general for any, the mid-sized spaces start for 158 a month. And that's in St. Pete's. I looked up St. Pete's. And then the larger 10x20s, they go for 100 to 340. So it's a little bit less. And these are things, that makes it a little bit more expensive of whether or not you can drive up to them, whether or not they're 24-hour facilities, whether or not they're climate controlled, humidity controlled. So those are the things going to be. Now let's talk about defaults. Defaults, it's part of it. You've seen the show, you've seen Storage Wars, or maybe you haven't, but it's basically about people auctioning off storage facilities sight unseen, and then they take the items for storage where I think the state is California, and then sometimes they get trash, sometimes they get treasure. It's kind of, I think people watch it because there's a curiosity there. What are people storing? What can they get? What a value is in these storage units. So the default status to have so many shows, and I think there are others, like there are other reality shows around storage facilities as well, beyond Storage Wars. I think I'd have to look at my notes to remember the exact ones. So why do people default? So they're saying the industry has a 5 to 10% default on storage units. So what happens? So in the situation of a family member of mine, I paid the storage unit. They ended up defaulting and I paid the first payment, and that bought them time to go get their stuff. But 6 days later, I had to pay $190 more to help them. So they had time to go get their stuff. And they did. They moved it out of that storage facility to another storage facility. But they still ended up losing their stuff because what ends up happening is when someone falls on hard times, one of the first things to go is the stuff that they didn't have time to declutter. If it's out of sight, out of mind, you end up defaulting on it. So, financial strain, job loss, medical bills, and then poor budgeting and underestimating the cost over time. So, people see these small bills, they think they can afford it, and we're talking about 1 in 11 households have a storage facility. And so if you're talking about 1 in 11 households, how many of these households don't have money or they're broke or they're living paycheck to paycheck? The average storage facility, they say, in these 1 in 11 households range from $100 to $300 a month. So that's $1,200 to $3,600 a year spent on storage. That's a lot of money. So what happens when you default? So people are using these storage facilities. I think they're going to use them for a short time, especially when they transition and move from one location to another. They think they're going to come back and check on this stuff or, and most times people don't go to their storage facilities as often. They put it away, they kind of forget about it. And the bill comes monthly and they pay it, right? But 5 to 10% of the time, they do not. They default. And so what happens is you have a grace period, and then that's usually 30 days after, let's say, depending on the contract. I think they give you, it has to be about 2 months, depending on the storage facility, that you can fall behind, and then they start charging you fees. So the fees are pretty hefty. So if I paid the storage facility fee of $533, that had to be at least 2 months plus fees or two something months of fees, and then 6 days later another $190. So you're talking about quite a bit of money. So it's almost $720 or $25 altogether. So you get locked out, and if the payment remains overdue, they can't get into the facility. So they can't get their items until their account is settled. And then, if they never pay, there's a set period. It varies by state, and it could be 30 to 90 days. And then they're going to be auctioned off. That could be where this fell into my family member situation, a family member of mine. And then they were able to get their items back. They moved it to a different facility. And then when they needed money again, my husband was like, no, not doing it again, not helping out. This is happening too often. They really can't afford a storage facility. And the reason why was, again, because the reason I think they had given up an office space, and I actually don't even think I mentioned that. They gave, and it was a move. So the items that were being stored were due to a move in storage space. And it was a pretty decent storage space that they had rented over in Florida. And so what happens, depending on the state, it goes through the auction process. It goes to shows like Storage Wars. And, those Storage Wars is California. And it goes to an online auction process. But what happens is whatever the auction sells, the person still owes the money for the storage unit. So everything is sold as is, and then the revenue takes away and it lowers the renter's debt to the facility, but they still owe money, so it can still come to them from collection. So if you're broke, you're struggling, and you have a storage unit, try to find someone's home that you can put the items in. Make sure you remove the items. If you have a spare bedroom in a home, you have an attic space, just be more selective. Throw out things in your home to make room for the storage. A lot of people, I know of friends and family members who come, and when they move items, they never actually unbox all of it. It's never been unboxed. And that could be the case of why 25% of all, garages are not used for cars, they're used for belongings. So that could be a reason why. Yeah, so ah, the other shows are called Auction Hunters. I think that's on Spike TV. Storage Hunters is on True TV, and again, that's part reality, and then they're auction dramas. And then the another one is Baggage Battles. That I think auctions off all different kinds of things, like lost um, luggage and stuff like that. I've never seen. I think I've seen Storage Wars is the only one I've ever seen. Um, anyway, they're popular. People want to know what's in the units. They like seeing, what's behind and to see if someone gets a hidden treasure. And then I think they like to see in the world of reselling and bargaining. But these are people who've lost their possessions. That's the crazy thing. These are people who have fallen on hard times and not able to pay their storage unit for the most part. Now, you have other cases where people just don't care about the items, whatever. They don't come and get their items. They cancel it, they don't pick it up, and it gets auctioned off. So there are cases like that, I imagine. And then there could be cases of where, someone just passes on and then their storage facility. Sorry, I'm holding my camera. Anyway, this whole thing of storage, if you don't have money and you have a storage unit, declutter. Declutter your home, find space within your home. If you have a spare bedroom or an office space, then you shouldn't, like move it out of storage so that you're not paying these $100 to $300 a month, depending on what it is down for the size unit that you're doing. It's a $39 billion a year industry, and 1 in 11, so 9% of households, a little over 9% of households, have a storage facility. What is it costing you? Anyway, this is Regina from Simply Fundamental. I like thinking about these kind of stories, especially when something comes to mind. And the reality is if you can't pay the bill, you can't afford the storage, then you need to face the problem of looking at what you have and decluttering and maybe minimizing and finding space for it, or, you know, finding someone else that can store for you that you don't have to pay to do so. Or move your car out of the garage and store it in your garage if you're among the 75% who do not have belongings in their garage. Use it for storage. Save your money. Okay, so Regina from Simply Fundamental, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next one.